It's been very rough. I'm kind of doing like a little documentation in a sense about things in regards to my dad and what's been going on. So I wanted to kind of read up. This is just like a first passage out of many in regards to what's been happening and the situations going on with his brain surgery, negative prognosis that just seemed to appear out of nowhere. So I'm going to be reading off the computer, but I'm right here. So 3 months. That would be without any treatment. If I decided to put myself through bouts of chemo and radiation therapy, that could extend to be 6, and if I'm lucky, 9. The downside is that I would feel the sickest I have ever in my entire life. That whole entire time. It's hard to imagine enjoying living these extra handful of months when I'm only going to truly be bedridden and on high doses of morphine to ease the pain just a little bit. They're going to cut into my brain in roughly 26 hours. I've been struggling for the past few months, but I didn't think much of it. Sometimes I would lack the proper coordination. I'd miss putting a drink on the table when I was using my right hand or my left hand, and I would bump into other people's carts at the grocery store, usually with the left side of my body, not realizing it was even there. People would get mad at me and, sometimes yell at me, but I literally couldn't tell. My left peripheral vision was getting so bad, and my coordination on my left side was the worst. And so I would just start running into things. I would run into the aisles. I would run into walls. I would just bang into the left side of my body and knock things over, whether that would be a bookcase and a shelf, but other people's groceries carts. I think I got chewed out the worst. I didn't wish to speak too much of it. It was very strange, though, how my awareness on my left peripheral, it was just waning. When I was driving, I started to have to turn my head all the way to the left just to see what was going on over there. I couldn't just use my eyes to glance into the side view mirror of my car. I had to fully turn my head, and it felt like it was becoming a danger. Sometimes I would turn and just not see things right and bump into a curb, run up on a curb. I accidentally hit the back of a truck once. Luckily, it wasn't anything severe, but it was definitely increasing my sense of worry. And I felt more and more like something was wrong as, my eyes started to get a little hazy. My vision just wasn't as good as it was, even though I just had got my cataracts out. So everything should have been great. Then it started getting into my walking. My walking started to be a little discoordinated. Like, I just couldn't maybe bounce myself as well. It was really just leaning more on the left side. So, one time I just went jogging. I used to go jogging 4 times a week. And one day I went jogging, and my left side just kind of gave out on me, and I fell straight to the ground. I had to catch myself with my right hand. And when I did so, it ended up bruising and scratching up my entire right hand. And I still have bruises on my palm from it. And at that moment, I just knew it wasn't safe for me to even jog anymore, which was really what made me the most happy. It was something I always did my entire life. At this point, I was starting to get a little afraid, but I didn't want to show that around anyone else. And, I'd have to say that it had just been getting worse and worse in those, most recent weeks of that last month. Things just started escalated. I'd always had sleep problems for like the last year, but then it was just getting more and more severe, and I was trying all different types of sleep medicines and, constantly in contact with my doctor all through March. But then it was hitting April, and it still wasn't working. Nothing was really working. And then the next thing that kind of hit me was just that my memory started going. And it wasn't just simple memory issues. It may have started off with where are my keys? But I think, a lot of us deal with that. But, I couldn't find the keys, or I couldn't find this or that. I just had something in my hand and then it would disappear. But then it would start being in odd places. And like one day I was at home and I had dirty laundry and I didn't know what happened to it. And then I ended up finding it an hour later in the refrigerator, and the fridge door was actually open. And I just left it like that. And I couldn't understand what had happened. Like, it made no sense. This was something that is nothing I would ever do. Like, it just didn't seem right. It seemed like something of a dementia patient. And that started to scare me even more. Another day I had gone driving out, and when I came home, I had left the car running with the keys still in it, and the door was wide open. I just left it like that for hours. Just for hours. Things were just getting it was just getting a little too intense for me, and I was starting to really wonder, okay, I think this is something more, and I probably need to get this checked. I had a feeling, okay, well, maybe it's just residual from a stroke. And, now I'm just dealing with the side effects of them, but I was still, apprehensive about going to the doctor, because then it's just like putting all this attention on me, and I didn't like playing the poor pity me thing. I didn't like getting that attention. I didn't like worrying others that I loved, and I didn't want to put them through that. But I knew that this was just not normal. I mean, I started forgetting people's names. They were just slipping out of my head, and I couldn't get them back, and I'd constantly have to be reminded. It was like these fleeting short-term memories were just not sticking with me, and I would even repeat myself at times, and it just seemed really distressing to me. My walking started to get more serious. I noticed the weakness on my left side was increasing to the point that it was a struggle just to walk upstairs. Like, I literally had to sit and just stand and focus on the step and moving my leg, and it felt, every time I moved my leg, like it felt like there was just kind of this force pushing it back, like a force in the air that was just pushing it back. And I couldn't fight through that force. It would take me so many times until I was finally able to break through this strong force field that was just pushing me like a magnetic force backwards. And I was able to break through it enough to be able to get my foot on that step. But then on top of the weakness, even that success was not enough, because I needed stability of like at least as something to grab my arm onto just to continue upwards. So at this point, I decided that it was the right thing to do, to just finally go see a doctor. A few days before I went to see the doctor, I started noticing my left hand was getting worse, and it was the same thing. It was like I was fighting through a force shield that just couldn't break through this force that was pushing me back, like magnetism force, where you have the two same poles just pushing off of each other, just in the air, this type of negative against negative, or positive against positive, just pushing against each other. And then sometimes it would just send a zap just up my arm that I would just have to shake off that like zapping energy that would just sting, and then I'd have to go back at it, and finally if I could push through it and grab the object, it wouldn't take long before it would just slip through my fingers and just fall onto the floor. And so even that little bit of success would just end in dismay. It even got to the point where when I was eating, I felt like a toddler, because I would lift up something with my left hand to take a spoon of food, and it would just spill. I couldn't balance it. I couldn't hold it. I would either drop it and spill it on me, or the cup would just spill on me because I couldn't hold it, or it would just start slipping sideways. And I just felt like I was a child that couldn't even eat without making a whole entire mess and having to change my whole wardrobe afterwards. I ended up using a towel like a bib just to try to protect myself. And I didn't know why this was happening. I mean, I was always so healthy. I was healthy, and I may have been a little older, but I was still, my body was in great shape, and I was doing so well, and never had any other issues besides just a hernia surgery once. But whatever this was, it wasn't right. Started to get to the point that my left arm became foreign to me. I would see my left hand kind of partially out of view because of the peripheral not registering it, but then when it would like kind of start to come in my view, and I felt like I wasn't even controlling what my left arm was doing, but when it would start to come into my view, it was like this weird foreign object that would just scare me because it just didn't feel like it was part of my body anymore. It's just... It was something that, I just knew too many things were going wrong. And it had been getting worse and worse. And I was assuming, okay, it's probably a stroke. And I was trying to, push through it way too longer than I should have. But after, watching so many people, including my wife, die in the hospital slowly of cancer, it was just something I try to get my regular checkups, but I don't like situations like this. It's too scary because I feel like it's just gonna end up being a death sentence, because that's what happened with my wife, and I so many others in my family, and I didn't want that to happen to me. My primary doctor came into his office, set up that appointment. It was hard walking up his steps, and I made it to the top and got inside, and, he examined me, and he was like, oh, well, this looks like it's most likely, you had some type of stroke. But he didn't want to rule anything out, He went through the basic procedures of stroke, and it was signaling that, but to be safe, he said he wanted me to go to the hospital and get an MRI done. And so he scheduled that, and I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I went to the emergency room area and crossed through the emergency room, went down this hole, and went to another lobby where I was able to go and wait to get my MRI done. And they brought me back, they laid me down. I'd been dealing with a lot of headaches and head pains. It's something I'd been dealing with for, I don't know, like a year, maybe a little more. Kind of the same with the sleep issues. And when they laid me down to the MRI, the sounds in that machine just aggravated my head. It was pure torture. And when they slid me out of that machine, and I was going back to sit in the lobby as they reviewed it, which didn't take very long, they immediately came and they were panicked, and they said, you have to go to the emergency room right now. Go back down the hall and go through the emergency room doors, because this is serious. We saw masses in your brain. Masses that are tumors. And this is something that is very serious, because one of them appears to be large on the right parietal lobe and is pushing your brain out of alignment by 4 centimeters. And that could end up being very lethal if it kept progressing. So now I was in a state where they were basically telling me I was going to need emergency surgery, and they assigned me to a neurologist. So I went into the emergency room, and I had to wait and wait and wait, and It was dreadful because I had all these questions and they were just doing blood work and basic things, but they didn't have the answers. I had to speak to the neurologist to get the answers, and finally I was able to meet with my doctor, Dr. Jacob. He came in, and he wanted to be upfront with me, and he said, your tumors are very aggressive. Like, they are very aggressive, most likely stage 4, and they are cancerous because they're not encapsulated, so they are basically spreading like into your brain, and we're not going to be able to fully remove them. They're most likely going to keep growing back. You have one on the right parietal lobe, and then one in the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is not one that they could access through brain surgery that they wanted to do to alleviate that pressure in my school. And then that tumor that was the big mass on the parietal, they knew they couldn't get all of it because the way these cancerous masses kind of embed into your brain, you could cause serious damage to cognition, to balance, to God knows what else. So, and if, these things look like what they seem to look like, which is most likely 95 or more % true, it's going to be the glioblastoma. And with a secondary tumor, that really wasn't something they could operate on. I said I'd be lucky, for like maybe 3 months without chemo and radiation, and going into possibly 6 to 9 months at best with chemo and radiation. And that was my prognosis. And I just had to kind of sit with that. And the plan was to get me into brain surgery as soon as possible. So they ended up moving me into a patient room. I got placed with a room that had someone that was in the room with me, and he seemed kind of not cognitively there, but he was having just hip surgery, and I don't know, he seemed just kind of really annoyed easily and irritable and just confused all the time, but I tried to be polite as possible, but it wasn't the ideal situation. It was hard to even relax very easly. I initially just was reflecting on everything and thought how crazy it was when they were like, go to the ER right now, and I go in there and they just move me into the front of the line, past all these people, broken arms, super sick, just injured and bleeding. They didn't care. I had to move past all of them because it was that serious. And at that moment I was kind of expecting not the best news about things, but until my neurologist spoke to me, that really just kind of solidified my fears. I literally had nothing, no clothes, no toiletries, no belongings. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. So I ended up contacting my spouse, and unfortunately I had to go over everything that just happened. And I didn't want to go into too detail about my life expectancy and things like that. But, I asked, can you please just, when you get off work, bring me my things and, whatever I could benefit from, clothes at least. And she went and got me my toiletry bag, got me changes of clothes, got me some other things to entertain myself, like word searches, crossword puzzles, things like that. And it was later at night, and I was still pending a patient, a time for the surgery. She came by and was able just to kind of drop off the things before visiting hours ended, and they kind of booted her away, and it sucked because then I just was alone again, and no one knew what I was going through. I didn't really want anyone to know. I wanted to hide. I didn't even want my child to know. I didn't want to let the truth out and destroy her. I wouldn't even put her on a contact list. I didn't put anyone on a contact list except for my spouse, and I felt bad because my child ended up finding out, I was in the hospital, and tracked me down to the right hospital and contacted and found me and wanted an update, and they said she wasn't on the list and they couldn't tell her anything, and I told them to tell her I'd call her later, and then I couldn't call her later because my roommate was just not having had noise at night. And so I just tried to text, and it just made me feel like a horrible parent, not being able to, something I should have just said a long time ago, and not being able to tell her still, and, I just said that I'm probably gonna just have to have some brain surgery, and I'm sorry, and she, freaked out. She, was adamant about getting there as soon as possible, and I was like, just don't bother until the surgery day. If you want to, just don't even fret about it. But she wasn't having it. She couldn't come up the next day, but she came up the day after, which would have been Tuesday, and the surgery was scheduled for Wednesday. But that'll come into a later video. I ended up doing some other scan on me where I had to drink this different colored fluid, so when they would scan my body, it would just kind of show up all through my body and show if there was any other types of cancer that, would have spread to the brain. And it didn't. So it being considered a primary brain tumor was really just what solidified it being a glioblastoma. And, at first I was like, oh, that's kind of good. It's not like spreading anywhere else, but in all honesty, it's not really promoting any longevity at all. It's still just the same prognosis. There's really no way to even treat it effectively. It's just stage 4, and there's nothing that can help. And I tried to take it as a positive, but then it's still just like I'm still screwed. I'm still not gonna have my life. What was really bad was the fact that there was a secondary tumor. And these tumors come back, and these tumors grow rapidly. These tumors are aggressive. These tumors can spread even further into the brain. And with how quickly they are seeing this happening in a matter of just a few months, really, it's not good. It's really not good. Because even though they're gonna have to do the brain surgery and cut off a piece of my skull, and they were going to have doctors, basically, doctor was talking to me about it. He's gonna hand do it and cut out as much as he can, and he has assistant physicians that watch this monitor live feed and kind of guide how he cuts, but there is no way, because of how it gets so embedded in the brain, being unencapsulated, like these cancerous ones are. It's just no way to cut it all out without risking huge damage to speech, cognition, walking, everything. It's such an integral part of the brain. At first I thought hope, because I saw on the MRI that the secondary tumor in the frontal lobe, it was saying it was not, like, it was heterogeneous, so it wasn't like necessarily looking the same as the one on the parietal lobe, but on that, like, there was a gray white matter, no gray white matter differentiation. I don't know, it was kind of signaling it was maybe just edema, and I thought, oh, is it just only edema? Are you saying it's not a tumor at all? But then I realized it was the edema around the tumor that commonly forms that was kind of disrupting how it was appearing on the MRI. But they were pretty confident it's just another cancerous tumor that just had already spread. And if it's something they can't attack and something they can't get to, it just makes me wonder, what kind of pain is that going to bring me? How much worse is that going to get, and how quickly? Am I just going to wish I was dead even before 3, 6, 9 months? I started to wish I was dead now. But I knew that wasn't right, but it's hard. It's hard being told these things. It was kind of nice to just, have my clothes brought to me and some simple crosswords or word searches. The person I was rooming with really didn't like TV and didn't really like noise, so I was kind of just stuck in my own head if I didn't have those things. So then I just started doing word searches and crossword puzzles, and I tried to charge my phone onto a plug-in behind my hospital bed, but the phone would always fall off the table and I'd have no way to reach it because there would be a fall risk, so I couldn't even get up without an alarm going off to try to get it. I couldn't even, go to the restroom without someone walking me there and kind of monitoring outside of the door and checking to make sure I was okay. It felt just embarrassing. I felt like I had aged decades in just a matter of really a few weeks. That's how quick that downfall was. I hardly was able to talk to my spouse before visiting hours was already over, and she had to leave, and there I was again, stuck in my head more than anything as the lights were turned off, and my phone was dead and out of my reach, and I had to just try to sleep, but my mind just raced and raced and raced. I had 26 hours before my surgery. I thought it was going to maybe be Friday or maybe that following Monday, but then they said, no, we've got to do it. We've got to do it tomorrow. We got to do it Wednesday. I guess just get it on over with how much that tumor kept pushing my brain out of alignment. I accepted it as what needed to be done. I tried to just laugh or joke or smile, be polite, cut jokes with nurses and techs, and be genial and kind, and didn't even want to bother them hardly at all if I didn't have to. And they thought I was sweet, but inside I was really just in pain and dying, and I just didn't want other people to know how bad it really felt, how scared, how depressed. But I was always good at wearing masks. I did theater. I toured a lot. I can put on and act pretty good. And that's what I tried to do, because sometimes faking a smile can make you actually feel a little better in your brain. Some kind of chemical reaction comes. It's like fooling yourself to think you're happy. So that's what I tried. I think I'm gonna stop there, but I'll continue with the part 2 of the journey, and thank you for watching.